Afternoon everyone, Joe Blow here. I wanted to make another video for you guys. So this one today is I want to talk about, is the UK becoming more dangerous? Is it more dangerous? And what are we going to do about it, and what are the repercussions? So the reason for this video was earlier in the week I get a message from my mum, I think this was on Tuesday morning, saying to me, Tom, did you come over last night? Because about 2 a.m. in the morning I heard knocking on the door and it really spooks me. Now, I was in the land and nod at 2 a.m. in the early hours of Tuesday morning, but naturally hearing this kind of news gave me great pause for concern. So I went round to my mum and dad and I checked in on them, saw how they were. And my mother can be a little bit on the dramatic side and can be a bit difficult at times, but there was something about what she said that made me believe that she generally heard someone knocking at the door. She heard what she thought was knocking on the door. So I said to them, look, I'll tell you what, I'll crash the night, I'll crash the following night, I'll sit on the sofa, and if anything happens, obviously I'm here. Because, you know, all the while, even though my dad's there with my mum, he's extremely sick and poorly now. He's a borderline invalid, so there's not really much he can do. So that gives me almost more concern, because they're quite vulnerable people as a result. So I crashed the night, half expecting nothing to happen. However, 2 a.m, something did wake me up. It sounded like a door handle trying to be turned, and my first thought was someone's trying to get into the house through the side door. So I leaped up out the couch and I went straight to the front window, because of how my mum and dad's property is. They've got a front door and they've got a side door. Now everything's locked. I made sure everything was locked up, curtains are drawn and all this kind of stuff. And unless you can climb over sort of like a back gate, make a lot of noise, there's nowhere else you can go other than back up the drive to leave the property. So I stood by that window, that front window, and I stood there for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes. No one walked up that drive. So I went to the back of the house, tried to peer out into the garden, but you've got to bear in mind this is 2:15 in the morning at this point. It's absolutely pitch black. I turned on the porch light, I went outside, I checked down the side of the house, I scanned the road because they're in like a little cul-de-sac, and nothing. But so maybe it was my overactive imagination, but I just find it a rather strange coincidence that she thought she hears something the night before, and then I think I hear something the night before. Needless to say, I did stay one more night round there, and nothing happened. Now, they don't have a car anymore, and I parked in a lay-by across the road. I didn't want to park on the drive. If there was going to be a prowler, I wanted whoever it was to think it was just my mum and dad in. Nothing disturbed or got me up the following night. So that was that, but I am getting one of those sort of door cam things fitted on their property. But this then did lead me to believe, because where I live, because I don't live too far from them, it's a rather quiet little area, you know, not really much happens. But it did make me think, you know, is the UK now becoming more and more dangerous? So I decided to look into this a little bit. And I looked on the ONS, and no, I'm not talking about one night stands for you naughty little online daters. I'm talking about the Office for National Statistics, and apparently for the years 2023 through to 2024, 6.66 million crimes were reported. I mean, it's a bit of an unusual number, by the way, wouldn't you think? But you think about that, you know. I think the population of England alone around that time is what, somewhere between 65 to 70 million people. That's like saying 1 in 10 people reported a crime. back then. I mean, that's phenomenal. 1 in 10 people. You know, you live in a town of 100,000 people. 10,000 people reported a crime. You know, it's mind-boggling. So I looked a little bit further into this. Apparently, knife crime has gone up something like 4% in the last year or so. Shoplifting has gone up 24% since September last year. And, you know, and that kind of goes back to my last video, guys. You know, are people shoplifting because of the cost of living? Now, we're all feeling the pinch, aren't we? I'm feeling the pinch. I'm sure a lot of people watching this are feeling the pinch. I don't feel the need to go out and steal, though. I don't feel the need to go out and steal food, you know, no matter how tough things are. And yeah, inflation's a bastard, and there's not much we can do about that. But you know what? If you've got problems with eating and stuff like that, you've got to prioritise and budget a bit better. You know, there are things you can do. You can make small little tweaks. You know, I'm doing it now to make sure that you know, you're not having to resort to stealing and so forth. But anyway, I digress. So going back, I did carry on looking into the statistics of it all, and apparently, you know, violent robbery leading to serious injuries have gone up dramatically in the last year or two. I mean, that statistic I said just now, 6.66 million from the year 2023 through to 2024. Apparently that's an all-time high for 22 years in the UK. But what was interesting was some of the reasons given. So obviously one of the more obvious reasons were not enough funding being given to the police force, and I think we can agree that that's a very, very real thing. You don't see police on the beat anymore, do you? I mean, how many times have you been the victim of a crime? You know, you've had your car nicked or something like that, or someone's put a brick through it. You report it to the police. What do? Tell you to fill out a form. No one's really interested in dealing with that kind of thing. Yeah, you know, if you came round and said someone spray painted a very inflammatory symbol on my car, then Jesus Christ, there'd be 20 coppers round, wouldn't they, taking you know, DNA samples from the paint. But you know, it's so you could argue that, you know, have the police got their priorities wrong in terms of what they consider, you know, an important crime to deal with. You know, now I don't want to bag out on the police, because I know people in the police, you know, people that have been doing the job for 20-25 years, you know, that are in their sort of 40s, 50s, you know, and for no pun intended, but you know, the system, you know, they're handcuffed by the system now, the bureaucracy of it. You know, the police can't deal with criminals properly. I mean, you think about it. London is the knife crime capital. I don't think it's Europe. I think it's the world now. You know, and the Metropolitan Police are what? Don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure they're probably the largest concentration of police in the country. Yet we've got rampant knife crime because the police aren't allowed to do stop and search properly, because apparently that is much more offensive than people being stabbed. I mean, it's absolutely crazy and nuts. But you've got to look at the people coming through now. I remember talking to somebody last year about this, and she was telling me, you know, she's a detective sergeant and she's been doing the job for 25 years. Can't wait to retire in her sort of mid to late 50s. But she was saying some of the youngsters coming through, just, you know, it's not just that they're wet behind the ears, she says they just look like frightened sheep, and she says she looks at them and she thinks they're going to get eaten alive out there on the street. So you could argue that the police that we have got coming through are not up to task. They're not up to scratch. You know, incompetence. And as it is, the police force simply cannot recruit people. I mean, wasn't there that big thing in the news a few weeks back that they want to lower the bar for people entering the police force? I mean, you know, you're playing a dangerous game when you're doing that, I think. So anyway, that's one of the reasons, apparently. Another reason is a growing population, which I found a bit of a joke, because it was always my understanding that there was population decline in the West, you know. Fewer and fewer people are getting married, you know. I mean, this you could talk about this in another video. I think a lot of men now are seeing marriage as a little bit of a, it's not a good deal anymore. It's not a good deal. It's not the dream that was once sold. It's expensive. You know, people say that they can't afford to buy a house because you need about 100k for a deposit. But, you know, people will spend 50k on one day for a wedding. And, you know, what are you doing? What is that? You know, it's 50, you're basically spending, you're hiring out a really expensive venue, and you're paying for loads of guests and family members to come and watch you get married to somebody. That's what that money's all being spent on. You know, call me a cynic, but I think the happiest person at a wedding is the divorce lawyer, because 1 in 2 marriages seem to end in divorce, and that's not a good deal for men, as we know. So, you know, but the point I'm trying to say is, if fewer people are getting married, then fewer people are having kids, because that's kind of the natural thing. You get married, you have kids, you get a house, white picket fence, you know, etc. So if less and less people are getting married, where is this growing population coming from? And well, there's only one answer to it, isn't it? Our growing population is being imported. That's no secret, isn't it? You know, immigration is at an all-time high. You know, so perhaps the reason that the government feels they have to import a government is because people simply are not getting married. They're not having kids, because even having kids in themselves is expensive. So if it's our quote unquote growing population that's responsible for crime, well, what can you really say about that? But another reason, another cause, they said, for increasing crime, because crime takes place in many forms, doesn't it? You know, cybercrime was mentioned, which I thought was quite interesting, and we are moving into an era where I think we're becoming more and more digital. You know, I've heard of people with smart fridges and things like that, but I've heard people that have had, you know, bank details hacked because people have hacked into their smart fridge or the smart system of their security for their home. But while we're talking about cybercrime, I thought it was interesting because there was no mention at all in the Office of National Statistics for thought crime. You know, and this is the crime of having an opinion that our pearl clutching elite don't approve of. So, you know, I think back in 2022 there was a statistic that came out of something like 9,000 people in the UK in 1 year got arrested for internet crime, compared to less than 100 in Russia. Yet, you know, we're peddled that Russia are the dictators, that they're run by a dictatorship, and we are the bastions of freedom, you know, bringing freedom to the rest of the world, you know, one grenade and bullet at a time. But again, that could be a topic for an entirely other video. So you do wonder, is thought crime, aka online crime, is that part of what they call cybercrime? Because again, you know, when your house is being burgled, the police are one e-form away, whereas you say something a little bit naughty online and Jesus Christ, you've got 20 coppers kicking down the door. So anyway, I mean, at the end of the day, as I said, I live in a fairly quiet, nice rural area. I mean, as you can see, look, it's beautiful around here. This is one of the bridle paths that I've just been moving around. But you know, and I think a lot of crime in the UK is sort of concentrated in the city areas. But you know, it filters out. You know, you'd be naive to think that crime only happens in cities. And you know, of all the will in the world, I can't stay at my mum and dad's every single night now. So, but look, we're going to get this doorbell fitted, so at the end of the day we can keep an eye on them. But it is worrying. So, you know, all I can say is look after yourself, everyone. Stay in shape, because no one else is going to look after you, are they? But you know, look after your family and your friends, especially the ones that are a bit more vulnerable. Anyway, peace.